Okay, so you bring up an interesting point about the coincidence, which again now goes to this interpretation of the symbolism, right? Because for one, we have to admit we don't know, right? We don't really know for a fact why the calendar is dated to that, and there's no official, as far as I've looked, and I can, correct me please if I'm wrong, there's never been an official explanation for the calendar at all.
The calendar of light you're talking about?
Yes.
Well, you're talking about two different things, really. I mean, you're talking about the 4004 that is used in craft masonry.
But is it used? It's the year 4000. This is the year
no,
6005 for the AL.
No, it's not. It's 6009. Now, what the Americans do is one thing. What England and Victoria do is another thing.
I see.
We add 4004. We used 4004.
So the calendar of light, you're saying in America is different than in Australia?
No, I'm saying that the 4000, when we get a certificate, whether we're still doing it, whether it's still in English and Latin, I don't know. But my certificate says I was initiated in the year 1959 or the year of light 5963.
Aha.
So, as I'm saying, Freemasonry, craft Freemasonry from England has always used the 4004 calculation.
Was it Pike who initiated the change in America?
I don't know.
To 4000?
I can't answer that one.
You see,
I think the change was made in America because Americans are simple people and they would rather add 4000 than 4004.
Oh, no. That may or may not be true.
Coincidence?
But the thing is now, with the Pike connection, I'm very suspicious now if it's just been changed in America. And even if it wasn't Pike per se, the idea of altering it to the 4000, what's interesting about that is that connection I made to the calendar of light in the Egyptian cult wasn't known in the West until the French went and decoded the hieroglyphs, which would have been the early 1800s, right?
Yep.
Pike comes in right after that, and now we're on the year 4000 instead of 4004. Perhaps there was a deliberate change meant to marry it more specifically to the Egyptian as opposed to the strict Christian view, which is Pike's whole agenda anyway.
Yes. Look, I would have no problem in accepting that in his extremely amazing mind, Pike would have gone down this line, etc. and so forth.
Right.
In the craft itself, the whole connection was purely the biblical connection. Nothing to do with the Egyptians or anybody else. When Freemasonry was developing in the 18th century, or 17th, or wherever you want to start it, when it was developing, the literal interpretation of the Bible was a very, very strong part of the community. England and Scotland, for that matter, were very, very strong Christian countries, and to a large extent Protestant countries. And in that context, the literal interpretation of the Bible and that Freemasonry began 6,000 years ago, the world started 6,000 years ago, is not surprising.
Right.
In fact, it would be surprising if they
didn't have that view, given who they were.
Yeah, that particular view.
Right.
What Pike did later on was his own views. It was entirely disconnected from the craft itself. I think you've got to see the Scottish Rite as certainly in the era we're talking about,
which is 1850 to 1900.
In that era,
yeah,
as quite distinct from the craft. Which in most countries who had Freemasonry, the number of people who went into the Scottish Rite was a very, very small percentage. I mean, even smaller than it is today. It was a very small, very secluded, not select, it's just that people weren't interested in it. So that whether the Year of Light and the Exploding Star, etc., occurred or didn't occur, it would have had absolutely no influence.
Especially pre-hieroglyphic decoding.
Yeah, on
Of
English,
1822.
Yeah, that's right, on that early English Freemasonry.
Right, of course, of course.
Afterwards, a different. I think the Year of Light. You know, let's not fall for the trap of looking for something that isn't there. The Year of Light is when God said, "Let there be light."
Mm-hmm.
End of story. And that was in the Bible, 4,004 years before. I mean, Usher wasn't the first to make this calculation.
No, absolutely not. Right.
He might be the one that's got the credit for it.
Uh-huh.
And I just think that that's all it really was, this literal interpretation. It's the same, you know, we say that people get Pike all wrong because we want to use a literal interpretation of the Bible.
Right.
Well, we can't have our argument both ways and say, oh, but in the Year of the Light we didn't have it literal. You know, that literal interpretation is either there or it's not. And right through that period of time, that literal interpretation was the very strong
prevailing wisdom.
Well, yeah, of society in general.
Right.
And yeah, without having to go, as I said, without having to go at the average minister, he got his Bible and he read his Bible and that was it. I mean, it's arguable that the King James version of the Bible is not necessarily the Bible on which Freemasonry is based. It's more likely that most of the stuff in Freemasonry came out of the Geneva Bible.
Geneva Bible being, I'm weak on that right now.
being about 50 years earlier, an earlier translation.
I see.
The King James version is the one that became adopted throughout England and then throughout, because there were a number of versions around.
Of course.
This is when King James said, "There's too many of these versions running around loose. Let's get an official one." And the Geneva Bible, which, as I said, we've got a copy of it down there, was produced back in I think it was about the 1550s. And if you look at the Geneva Bible, there are diagrams, and one diagram in particular shows the two pillars with spherical balls on top of them, with the
terrestrial and celestial globes.
And when people say, you know, they wouldn't have been there in the time, where did they get this idea from?
And that was what, 1200s, 1300s, 1400s?
1500s.
It's King James era, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
where did they get that from?
They got it out of the Geneva Bible. Now, where the Geneva Bible got it from is another matter.
I see.
You know, it's a bit like we were talking about with some of these things on the wall. The person who did the Geneva Bible puts some little illustrations in. Nobody knows why, where he got the ideas from. And people say, oh, look, these are wonderful, aren't they? Bring your camera, I'll show you.
Okay. See, it's interesting with the King James Bible, how definitive it was, and how it almost hijacks all other competitors for being the official version.
Right, see, there's the Geneva Bible with the forms of the pillars.
I see.
Now, it hasn't got the diagrams on them, but there they are with the the spherical balls. And if you see, MDLX is
MDLX would be 1560. Yeah, 1560.
Right? So that's the Bible. This was produced in 1560.
I see.
It was 50 years roughly before the King James version.
I see.
And Neville Barker Cryer in England has done a long lecture on the Geneva Bible and Freemasonry, and he's perfectly convinced that it was the Geneva Bible that was used.
I see.
For much that was done in Freemasonry, and not the St James version.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And actually, there's a lot more I could go on that, but I think it would sidetrack me from even getting back to any other topic. But okay, quickly here, is there a PowerPoint somewhere around here?
No, it's bound to be someone. Yeah, around here.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'm running low on my battery, so I'm going to pause.
4 hours of it.
Well, no, the recording hard disk has 4